In this tutorial, we're going to cover just the basics of the asset tree. Assets represent single models that you've imported. And if I click on one of the two models here, it's selected not only here, but also in the tree. So we can see this one's for the French Bulldog, and this one is for the old car. You can select and deselect models by clicking on it here. And you can hide the model from the scene by clicking on the eye icon. The big takeaway that you need to learn about the asset level features, and depending on what version of Relief Maker you have, you may not have access to some of these, is that this effectively operates as an override. So what do we mean by that? Everything you see here, at least in these boxes, is also located here somewhere. And globally, let's say we make this 50 and we create a relief. If I look at this from the side, this is what we're going to get when we apply that 50 value to the entire model at once. But maybe we do that and we say, you know what? We want the dog to be more pronounced, but the car is pretty much okay. Well, I can go in here and I can override that value. Maybe I put this at 100. Just, whoops, that's for the dog or car. Let's make it for the dog. And when we do this, we're going to see just the dog and maybe some areas immediately surrounding the dog in the car are going to change, but most of the car will remain the same. So let's go ahead and do that. And you can see the dog is now much more pronounced. So it gives you control over specific assets and how they're treated versus using the same global control for everything. Just be aware that 99% of the time, you may need to mess with height scale on an asset level basis to get what you want. Almost never will you need to mess with max slope percent or the critical feature size or critical feature scale. And these are all going to be topics for an advanced video later on. Just be aware that this thing is probably the only thing you're going to need to mess with most of the time. Now, if I delete this and press tab, we see that the values it's grayed out once again. And you can basically interpret a grayed out value to mean it's inheriting it from the global parameter. If I overwrite it, that value is now black, right? So to return to inheriting the default, just delete it and press tab, and now you are seeing the same value grayed out here. The last thing that we'll talk about in this video is going to be order of things in the tree. And there's really one case where order matters, and that's when you're messing with the depth combined option. And if we hover over it, we can kind of see what that does, but let's visually show what it does instead. I'm going to turn it off. And when I turn off depth combined for the dog, it basically says it's going to turn off reality, right? In reality, this dog is positioned inside the car, right? We can all see that. But if I turned off depth combined, it says, I don't care about that. Show the dog in front of the car. And there's specific cases where this is useful. We're not going to cover those here. And you're usually going to have depth combined turned on, and so it doesn't really matter. But if I turn off depth combined for both things, we see there's no change. And that's because this particular feature relies on the order in the tree. And so if I drag old car down, now we see that old car is the last in the tree with depth combined, and so it gets the priority, right? It's always going to be in front of the dog. So you're usually not going to use depth combined unless you have a good reason to. Be aware that if you do, make sure that you're playing with the order of the items in the tree to get the results that you want. And that's going to be all we're going to cover in this video for the asset tree.